I wanted to find a bank with a purpose. I wanted to find a place that would take my money and not use it to cause the financial crisis, but to fix the financial crisis and to help end income inequality.
The people that we employ are usually clients right off the streets. They don't have an account, but Amalgamated is willing to get that started for them.
Their reputation supporting the working man, I think, speaks for itself. This is a bank that cares for their customers, and I appreciate that.
We were able to access a construction loan through the bank's programs, and that loan has helped us house 28 families in the community.
Amalgamated is a bank that was started for and about working people.
Many of our customers have a deep commitment to advocating for social and economic justice. We share that commitment, and we're not afraid to stand up and say that we need to change some of the way that the country does business.
Giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show. Live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Yesterday in Florida, it was in Tallahassee, Florida. The students versus the NRA, and the NRA won round one. But the students aren't gone away. What do you say, everybody? Great to see you today. Here we are, middle of the week, a Wednesday, February 21, The Bill Press Show, live from Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, with lots going on here in Washington, around the country, especially down in Florida. Around the world, Bibi Netanyahu even in more trouble in Israel, as some of his top aides have been arrested and apparently are cooperating with the police in the investigation against him. It's only a matter of time before he says sayonara. And we've got all of that to talk about with all of you. The big stories of the day. Yep, state legislature in Florida, with the students there even refusing to debate a ban on assault weapons. Meanwhile, Donnie Jr. is over in India raking up money for the Trump family, selling the presidency, and by the way, and condos in Trump Tower, India's Trump Tower, while he's at it. And Donald Trump yet again calls one of the women who accused him of offensive sexual behavior, sexual assault, calling her a liar. You want to talk about it all? We want to hear from you. Your comments on all of the above and more. Send us your comments on Twitter, at BP Show. You are very much part of the conversation. We want to hear from you on Twitter, at BP Show. With all that news, we got to get right to it, and we will. But first,
This is the Full Court Press.
Yes, sir. Just a couple of other stories making news. If you're looking for love out there, there's a new dating website for you. It is all for Trump supporters. Trump.dating is the name of the website. You can go on there
each other.
and you can date other Trump supporters, right? That's the thing these days. But here's the thing. It was put together by a man named John Riddleberger and his wife Jody. They are the co-founders of a Tea Party-inspired PAC called Conservative for Guilford County. Now, they put together the site, and they have models on the front page. They're wearing Make America Great Again hats, a man and a woman. It looks like they're very happy, and they're in love. Here's the problem, though. WRAL reported that the man that is posing there was convicted of indecent liberties with a minor in 1995. He was caught having sex with a 15-year-old when he was 25.
He's a perfect Trumper.
He's a perfect Trumper. Exactly. Yeah. He was convicted in 2014. So, like you said, this certainly keeps in line with...
Are you kidding? They hired him because he had a sex with a minor.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the time, it goes against you on a resume.
No. Not for working in the Trump White House.
We go down to South Carolina, where a new bill proposed in the South Carolina legislature would allow fines for men and boys who are walking around with sagging pants.
Ooh.
House Bill 4957 said it would be unlawful for a person to, quote, appear in public wearing his pants more than 3 inches below the crest of his ilium exposing his skin or undergarments. End quote. That is...
Man, they'd have a hard time in Washington, D.C. collecting all the fines. They'd have to...
Yeah, right?
I think in most cities around the country these days.
It's hard to turn that into a law, legislating what people wear, right?
Well, this would be when I was a teacher and I used to have the dress code. You have to enforce the dress code,
Sure.
right? The length of hair and the collar and all that stuff. We really want cops to be doing that?
Yeah, no, it's not for... I don't think it's a very good idea.
I must say it's a look that I don't really appreciate.
Sure. I'm going to wear a belt, right? But if you're not, I don't see how a cop...
We have one
regular
guest on this show. I won't mention his name, whose pants are usually down around, where they don't belong.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Showdown in Florida yesterday. This was just round one in the post-Parkland, Florida gun control debate. Round one, the students lost, the NRA won, but it doesn't stop there, and the students are not going to go away. This tide is turning, and it's going to turn against the NRA. Hello, everybody. What do you say? Happy Wednesday. It is Wednesday, February 21. Great to see you. And thanks for joining us here. It's the Bill Press Show coming to you live all across this great land of ours. It's a far reach to California, but we are there, Oregon, Washington, and every good place in between, coming to you online on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show on this Wednesday. As always, also joining you on Free Speech TV. Thank you for joining us on DirecTV, Free Speech, and out in the Chicago area. There you go, WCPT, the progressive voice of Chicago, loud and strong, as well as Indiana Talks throughout the state of Indiana. Hello, 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 and thank you for joining us. Look forward to hearing from you and your comments on the news of the day. Send us your comments on Twitter at BP Show, so we know what you think about what's going on. And yes, indeed, it was day one of the students from Parkland, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, or it's Douglas Stoneman, I call it the Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, who vowed that they were going to take this battle all the way to the White House, all the way to Washington, D.C., a battle to have some sensible and common sense gun control measures in the wake of the tragic shooting at their school last week, which left 14 students and 3 teachers dead. Students said they're going to have the big march in Washington on March 24, but in the meantime, they were going to make their way to Tallahassee. 3 busloads of them did yesterday to Tallahassee, Florida, and the state capital. And in their honor, the fact that they were there, one of the state legislators in the House of Representatives, who last October had introduced a bill to ban assault weapons in the state of Florida, said, well, this is a good day. Let's bring it up for a vote today. So he introduced a measure it's sort of like they do in the Congress. You got to vote first on whether or not you're going to vote. You vote first on whether or not you're going to open a debate and allow a vote. And on that procedural vote, well, here's what the call was.
All those in favor signify by saying yay. Yay! Opposed? No. Show the motion's not adopted. The clerk will unlock the machine and open the board.
So with the students sitting in the balcony, the state legislature says, by a vote, by the way, they did do the vote count as well. It was 71 to 36. The NRA won. The NRA, the people who took the money from the NRA, and our good friend Igor Volsky and others tweeted out yesterday the names of those legislators and how much money they took from the NRA. The NRA got 71 votes. Those for just doing the right thing, banning assault weapons, 36 votes. And the students are left brokenhearted, but not broken back. They are. This is just the beginning. But imagine that. They wouldn't, in Florida, where this happened, in Florida, where the Pulse nightclub happened, they wouldn't even allow the measure to come up for a vote. They wouldn't even allow it to come up for debate and discussion. They wouldn't even open the... So all this nonsense that you hear from some of these right-wingers, oh, we're going to have, like the president today, we're going to have a listening session, right? Or we are open to ideas. No, they're not. This is a chance to, let's hear the ideas. Let's have an open debate. Let them get on the floor and tell us why, in God's name, they think anybody should have a military assault weapon in their home or in their car. They can't make that debate. They can't make that argument. And so they just voted down even the opportunity again to give those who would like to see some sensible gun control measures, to give them their day in court.
How do you do that? How do you make that vote in front of those kids that are there?
Sick.
And by the way,
sick.
Not a close vote.
No.
Not a close vote.
Right. You know what? The fact is, they don't care. They don't care. Rick Scott, the governor, doesn't care. Marco Rubio, U.S. Senator, who said how heartbroken he was after the Pulse nightclub and has done absolutely nothing. Marco Rubio, who said how heartbroken he was in Parkland, Florida last week, and has now, all he's saying is, well, we just can't do stuff that's going to make us feel good. He has done absolutely nothing. I just hope they feel the wrath of the Florida voters, both of those two in particular, this year when Rick Scott has the audacity to think that he could run for the U.S. Senate.
You know, if there's a Democrat running, or when a Democrat runs, because as we've pointed out, Democrats should run in every district, they should just say, like, look, I know some of these kids are too young to vote, but they have parents. And if you want your kids to feel safe in the schools, we're going to do this, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Because I realize it's going to be different from state to state, right? But accept nothing less.
I would make this the number one issue. And so, again, that was just round one. Hearing from these students, they are they're not going to be as discouraged as some people think that they're going to say, oh, no, well, we can't do it. I guess we're going to run away. Not this group. And that's what I want to get to next. There was, and this really pissed me off. There was a concerted effort begun yesterday, and this happens all the time. So remember when Khizr Khan spoke at the Democratic National Convention, right? So what's the first thing they said about him? Oh, he's some radical Muslim from the Muslim Brotherhood. He's a terrorist, right? He was speaking about his son who gave his life for us in Iraq wearing the U.S. military uniform, a Muslim. When the Me Too movement started and women started speaking out, what did so many people, starting with the President of the United States, say about them? Oh, they're all liars. All these women are liars. You can't believe them. They're just making this up. Some of them are being paid to say this, right? It's Democrats who are paying these women to say this to attack Republicans. Yeah, we saw that. It's this effort right away to try to demean and to insult and to slander the people who are trying to do the right thing or fighting for the right thing. It has started big time now against the high school students in Florida. Yesterday in Florida, there was a legislative aide to a state rep in the state legislature who actually sent an email to a reporter saying that two of the seniors at the high school in Parkland, Florida, were paid actors. That legislative aide has been fired. There was absolutely zero evidence of that. Don't know where it came from, but it's didn't have to be. Online, social media saying, oh, these guys are fired. Well, that was bad enough. But yesterday there was a paid CNN contributor, a former Georgia congressman, Republican congressman, Jack Kingston, on New Day yesterday morning, Allison Camerata interviewing him because he had put out a tweet over the weekend saying something basically that these students didn't know what they were talking about and they must have been being paid by some left-wing groups. Jack Kingston goes on CNN yesterday. I keep coming back to this. He is paid on CNN, paid to say this.
Do we really think that, and I say this sincerely, do we really think 17-year-olds on their own are going to plan a nationwide rally? I would say to you very plainly that organized groups that are out there like George Soros are always ready to take the charge, and it's kind of like instant rally, instant protest.
That's Allison Camerado, who was pissed herself because
she popped off on him.
She popped off on him. I've got the whole exchange. So she was Allison, who's great. I really love her. She was down there talking to these kids. She reported from that high school. She came back and she said, "Hey Jack, I'm sorry. I have to correct you. I was down there. I talked to these kids. These kids were wildly motivated. I talked to these kids before they knew the body count of how many of their friends have been killed." And he starts, Allison. She said, "No, Jack, no one had talked to them yet. They had not been indoctrinated by some left-wing group. They were motivated from what they saw and what they endured during that ordeal." And he says, "Well, I don't doubt their sincerity." And she slashed back, "Yes, you do." Good for her.
Damn.
Yeah, good for her. I mean, the audacity to say that these kids, by the way, who've done something you and I've never had to do, they stared right down the barrel of an AR-15. They watched their fellow students shot down, murdered, their teachers. They lived with that fear. And there's the stories you hear them and you read their stories. And one young girl said she ran all the way to Walmart, and she gets into Walmart and she felt safe in Walmart. And then she discovered that the killer had gone to Walmart. You know, I mean, to imagine this trauma. And they come out of that and they just have had it with all this cowardly backing away from doing anything sensible about guns and leaving them and their families just absolutely vulnerable to any idiot could walk in, buy one of these guns and walk into their school. And then somebody turns around and says, "Oh, they're just being used. They're just being used as tools by the left-wing propagandists, by people like George Soros." You know what? They don't even know who George Soros is. It's just absolutely no. I wish CNN would say, if you don't have any facts to back up a charge like that, you're fired. Get off the air. Why do they let him make just totally baseless charges like that on CNN? At any rate.
By the way, he's not alone in this.
He's not alone. He's not alone.
We talked yesterday about how Donald Trump Jr. had liked a tweet from some right-wing outlet, Gateway Pundit, and they had made this argument that, well, one of the kids from the school, his father, was in the FBI, and apparently did not like Donald Trump, right? And so that alone is a reason that these kids are paid actors. Dinesh D'Souza, I'm not going to give him any more press, but he was on Twitter yesterday sort of praising the Florida lawmakers for voting this down, for not even having the vote on the assault weapons. He just said, adults 1, kids 0. And it's it's not kind of grotesque. It is grotesque, but it's also just like some of these establishment thinking Republicans, which there are fewer and fewer these days, has got to come out and just say, this is crazy.
Yeah.
This is too much. When you're attacking kids, you've lost the argument.
The other thing Kingston said yesterday, "I also know they probably do not have the logistical ability to plan a nationwide rally without it being hijacked by groups that already had the pre-existing anti-gun agenda." Well, you know what? This is not only Jack Kingston showing his stupidity, he's showing his age. He's just too freaking old to understand that the world has changed. There's something out there called Twitter and Facebook and social media. And you know what? These kids have the uncanny ability online to do something that nobody of his age ever even thought possible. Look at the Me Too movement. Look at the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Look at Occupy Wall Street. They do have the ability, and they already have. Look at the Women's March on Washington. It started from a woman in Hawaii who just said to a couple of friends, we ought to have a march in Washington. And there are 1 million people that turned out here, right? It can happen overnight today. He doesn't freaking get it, right? These students do because they're right and they are resonating around the country and people are responding. Look what happened in front of the White House just 2 days ago. And you know this march in Washington is going to be huge. And look at the attention, again, around the country with groups are forming and other protests and other marches. This is happening spontaneously. You know, it's like here in Washington. I'm sorry, yeah, here in Washington, where when we used to have snow, when we used to have winter in Washington,
the good old days.
Remember, there were these snowball fights in DuPont Circle. Now, how did they happen? It just happened because people got on Twitter and said, let's have a snowball. Suddenly, thousands of people show up and they're throwing snowballs, right? It's a different world, Jack Kingston. And Stephen Colbert said something I thought very powerful last night. He said, this country belongs to the kids. It does. It doesn't belong to Jack Kingston and those old farts. No, they don't get it. They don't understand it. And I got to tell you, I really feel hopeful that this movement is working. It's going to get traction. It's getting traction. It's going to get even more traction, and it's not going to stop until they roll the NRA and roll these politicians who are supporting the NRA.
By the way, you talk about Twitter. We did yesterday around this time put up
a
poll.
Right.
Will the Parkland students and all of the other kids starting to protest mass shooting be the push we need for gun sense laws? We just asked yes or no. Poll is still open. It's almost closed. Yes, 66%. No, 34%.
Ooh, yeah.
So they agree with you, Bill. This might actually be the push that they were looking for.
Keep hope alive.
Keep hope alive.
Keep hope alive, indeed. So meanwhile, and people are saying, well, this is a sign. Okay, I want to warn you here, okay? Watch out for the BS, all right? Don't buy the BS from the White House. But they're starting to feel a little heat down there. And so now they're saying, oh, yeah, of course, President Trump, he's ready to make some changes. In fact, he said yesterday, we have to have, and this is the new refrain. Well, we have to, Marco Rubio tried this line too. Yeah, we have to do something, but we have to not just do stuff that makes us feel good. We have to do real stuff. Here's Donald Trump.
We must move past cliches and tired debates and focus on evidence-based solutions and security measures that actually work.
He could not sound more bored.
No.
Like, this is not something he gives two you-know-whats about.
Right. No, doesn't give a rat's ass. Never has. And certainly doesn't understand it. So what they're saying is, as proof that Donald Trump has seen the light, is first of all that he is, here's the key word, open. He is open to doing something about background checks. All right, well, BFD, right? Let's not applaud that at all or even feel good about that until we know what is he willing to do, when is he willing to do it, how far is he willing to go. He's talking about a bill that Texas Senator John Cornyn introduced last year that never went anywhere, which would have made like a tiny, tiny little change to the background checks. I'm not even sure what, but it was basically a BS bill. If that's all Donald Trump was talking about, forget it. And you know what? Even if it's a strong background check, like California, let's say 10-day waiting period in California, little tangent here, that was challenged by the NRA in the Supreme Court, and yesterday the Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to hear that case. We'll let California do what they want to do. Only Clarence Thomas voted to hear that case. 8 justices, including John Roberts, said, no, we'll let the California law stand. A 10-day waiting period. So, but even if Donald Trump came up with a very, very tough background check, that's still not all we need to do. We've got to get those. Well, we had somebody in yesterday talking about the number of guns in this country. New York Times has a count this morning. 310 million firearms in the hands of civilians in this country. That's one for every adult and child in America. So we got to do something with the easy access to guns, especially the access to assault weapons. So that's the first thing on Donald Trump. The other thing, now they've added that Donald Trump wants to do something about bump stocks. And that, in fact, after Las Vegas, which was last October 1, remember, Donald Trump said, then he was already president, of course.
Yeah.
That he asked the Department of Justice to look into possible regulations to not ban, but make it more difficult to get a bump stock, something like that. But he never said anything about it. Total news to us when they mentioned this yesterday. And the Department of Justice never did anything about it. And Donald Trump never asked Congress to do anything about it. And yesterday when he talked about it, all he talked about was, I've asked the Department of Justice to look into this. In other words, it means nothing. And again, remember, this was after the Vegas mass massacre, the worst in the history of this country. Republicans and Democrats on the Hill all said, let's go right now to totally ban these bump stocks, which allow someone to take an AR-15 and basically turn it into a machine gun.
It was unanimous. I mean, everybody you talked to said, yes, okay, these should not be a thing.
And then the NRA spoke up, opposed that, opposed that. That's why the NRA has no credibility today. And nothing happened there. And did we hear from Donald Trump about the bump stocks then during that whole debate? No, negative. So don't give Donald Trump a pass now saying that Donald Trump has suddenly seen the light and he is leading the way on gun safety measures. No, he's not. No, he's not. He may get there. I hope he does. I think I said this yesterday. This could be a Nixon in China moment for Donald Trump on guns. It could be. But I don't think he's got the balls to do it.
I don't think he has the balls to do it. I also just don't think he has the interest in it. He just doesn't
He doesn't
care.
have the interest. He doesn't have the intelligence even to do it. This is an opportunity. He could really step up and be a hero on this issue. But I think the train will pass him by. Meanwhile, he's not a hero on another issue. There is a woman by the name of Rachel Crooks. She was, I think, 24 years old. She was a young woman, got a job as a receptionist in Trump Tower 12 years ago. She says, and she will not back down from her story, that she was there on her job, and in walks Mr. Trump himself into the lobby, walks over to her, grabs her, plants a kiss on her with his tongue in her mouth that lasted for some 2 minutes. Donald Trump yesterday, you would think the President of the United States might have more important things to do.
You would think.
You would think that if you were accused of this, you might not be the one who's going to be continuing to go out there and talk about it. One of 20 women, by the way, who have accused him of anything from sexual assault to sexual harassment to sexual assault to rape. But he can't stop talking about it, so he puts out a tweet yesterday.
Where else? On Twitter, of course. Donald Trump tweeting yesterday, quote, "A woman I don't know and to the best of my knowledge never met is on the front page of the fake news Washington Post saying I kissed her for 2 minutes yet in the lobby of Trump Tower 12 years ago. Never happened. Who would do this in a public space with live security cameras running? Another false accusation. Why doesn't Washington Post report the story of the women taking money to make up stories about me? One had her home mortgage paid off. Only Fox News reported. Doesn't fit the mainstream media narrative."
Yeah. See,
I mean,
by the way, doesn't this reflect exactly what I said about what they're saying about the students? Students are taking money from George Soros, and Donald Trump is saying these women are taking money from, I don't know who, right? Jeffrey Katzenberg, or
right.
Yeah, right. No, it's the whole thing. Try to call them liars and say they're being paid to tell these stories. Again, when you have 20 women and when you have Donald Trump himself on that famous Access Hollywood tape bragging about doing exactly what she said he did, except he didn't. She doesn't say he grabbed her privates, but the planting, the forcing, the kiss. When you have 20 women who are saying that, you can believe the women. But she said yesterday again, I'm not surprised he called me a liar. That's what he said. That's what he calls all the women who who have made any charges against him.
But by the way, it's interesting in his tweet where he says, "Who would do this in a public space with live security?"
Donald Trump would.
Running? He did. He already has.
Yes. Donald Trump would and has. Exactly. Hey, one final thing before we take a break here. Got to tell you, went last night as a member of the White House Correspondents Association and the White House Press Pool. We had a little special little panel last night, a program where they brought in Mike McCurry, who was Bill Clinton's press secretary starting 2 years into the presidency, not at the very beginning. He came in right before Monica Lewinsky, poor guy. Mike McCurry and Sarah Huckabee Sanders on a panel together. And it was very, very interesting. Two things. Number one, McCurry said that he is the one who introduced cameras into the White House briefing room. He regrets it. He wishes he had never done it. He thinks they ought to shut the cameras down. You could run the cameras, but you cannot carry the briefing live. You could only use clips of it in your reports later that night when you're doing the evening news. I strongly disagree with Mike McCurry on that. I think that transparency is most important, and let the American people, no matter where they are, see the entire briefing, beginning to end, and make their own judgment about which reporters are asking good questions and whether or not the administration is telling the truth. And I think it's been a very successful program, and I thank McCurry for putting the cameras in. I disagree with him that we ought to take them out, number one. But the other thing that McCurry said, he turned to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and I tweeted this out last night, and said, you know, if we want to talk about how to make the briefings better, we want to talk about how the administration and the press corps can work better together to get the truth out to the American people. He said, your president has to stop talking about calling us enemies of the people. That doesn't help. And he's got to stop complaining about fake news. That doesn't help. And he turned to her and said, you have to tell your president that he has to change the way that he talks about the media.
Good for him, man.
Good for him. And she had nothing to say to that, actually, other than say, well, we really love the media. We respect that. How can you say we don't? Yeah, he said, because you call it fake news and because you call it the enemy of the people. Good for him. I wanted to stand up and cheer, but it was not that kind of a gathering. All right. We got so much to talk about, including what is happening in cybersecurity and what are we doing about the fact that we know the Russians not only meddled in the 2016 election, but they're probably at it again here in the midterms. Patrick Tucker joins us from Defense One, coming up here on this Wednesday edition of the Bill Press Show.
Follow us on Twitter @BP Show. This is the Bill Press Show.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation letter.
You're resigning.
Why? Because you're constantly ignoring me. You're half as active as you used to be, and you eat stuff like this. You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
I forgot. I'll do better. Please, don't quit on me.
Okay, but remember, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Adventure can be found anywhere, but the best place to start is in the forest.
I spy something beginning with S.
Snow?
No.
Snow-covered trees?
Nothing to do with snow.
Head outside to discover incredible animals and beautiful plants that come together to create an unforgettable adventure.
Wow.
So grab your loved ones.
Don't even.
And explore a world of possibilities.
Come on, this way.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find the closest forest or park to you.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the agony of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
This is the Bill Press Show.
You bet it is. On this Wednesday, February 21, the Bill Press Show. We are there with you wherever you are in this great country, starting out from our studio on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Good to have you with us today. Great to join you for our little roundup of the news. As always, from the left. Yeah, speaking of from the left, did you order your copy yet? If not, do it today. Comes out less than a month from now. And you can. This is the time to get your order in for a signed copy. From the left, A Life in the Crossfire. It's my story so far about a lot of the fun things that I've been lucky enough to do and the people I've met along the way, and some great stories. No secrets left after this book comes out. I mean, like you probably didn't, Peter, even you probably didn't know that I used to play the accordion.
Do you still play the accordion?
Are you
still know
kidding?
how to?
Put one in my arms. I still don't think I could do it. I don't know.
I'd
but
love
I
to see
actually
you
played
try.
in a national accordion contest once.
No, did you really?
Mm-hmm. Yep. There you go. We're up in New York City. So, yeah.
That's amazing.
All kinds of those embarrassing things, but a little more important things, too, about hanging out with Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and Jerry Brown and Bernie Sanders. It's all here at a great price, 40% discount. So the book is only $16.79. I'll sign it for you. Go to our website, BillPressShow.com, and get your order in today. And in those days, there was no internet, there was no cybersecurity problem, but boy, there is today. And Patrick Tucker from Defense One is all over it. Hello, Patrick.
Hey, how are you?
Fine. It's good to see you. So I saw yesterday that the president was saying we got to get serious about this cybersecurity stuff, and
yeah,
Department of Justice or somebody's got to do something about it. What are they doing about? Well, first, what is cybersecurity?
Well, that's just the our ability to keep the information that we create in an online environment safe and going to the parties that it's intended to go to and not being stolen by third parties and then used to steal our credit, steal our money, or steal elections, whatever you like. So,
or like shut down a transportation system, right?
Right, because that's part of information too
grid.
That's going between two institutions related to infrastructure, and that's also a big issue. So the U.S. government has been.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The U.S. government has been focused on cybersecurity related to institutions and infrastructure, and that's for a long time, since 2014, really in a concerted way, and before that in a more disorganized way, going back really since they started hooking pieces of infrastructure up to larger command and control systems that had external ports. But the interest in securing portions of the infrastructure that are related to voting, that goes back to the Obama administration. But even yesterday, as you point out, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced a cybersecurity task force related to the next election. And that's important. It also comes on the back of DHS Secretary Nielsen. You got to put the I in there.
Yeah.
Meeting in a classified setting with election officials from across the country. These are the folks that actually secure the hardware that people use to vote. And so, like, that's important because I want to know, like, what happens in this classified setting. I mean, did we discuss how vulnerable these machines were in 2016? Did we talk about what they are now? But the important thing to understand about election related cybersecurity and infrastructure is that voting machines, even the ones that are highly computerized, are generally not connected to the external internet. So there's a lot you can do to change potentially like voter rolls, the lists of people that are kind of allowed to vote. It's hard to do that without kind of causing some conspicuous notice. You can steal that information and then use it for targeted advertising, but actually changing votes, that's a much harder thing to do when there's no evidence that has been done. But it does involve basically going into warehouses where these voting machines are, and from there, when you actually have access to them, then it becomes very easy.
Well, are you saying that our voting machines... Well, I guess if they can hack into the Pentagon, right?
Yeah.
Or if they can hack into the White House, why can't they hack into a voting machine?
Because voting machines generally aren't connected to the internet. So you have to, that's the whole thing. There has to be some vein that's connected to the outside world where you can have remote access. So when in 2015.
Well, why aren't they connected to the internet?
Because it would be a terrible idea.
But you had to count the votes.
Yeah, they count the votes.
They don't count them. They don't go in there and look, click, 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 click. That's electronically they count the votes.
They do count them electronically, but they don't count them remotely. So that's the difference, is that they have to have election officials at these places that then go in, they exfiltrate the data from the machines, and then they count them on a local level. They don't, there's not some election person that sits and watches the tallies roll in from all the voting machines all over. And that's a safety precaution that they designed into these that's clearly very needed. But the machines themselves, if you have actual physical access to them, remain very insecure. But that's only one part of our voting infrastructure. There's also the voting rolls, which are kept in databases, which generally are accessible to the internet. Right. And so that's a vulnerability that also needs to be fixed. And this is something that the Department of Homeland Security, going back to the previous administration, has pointed out is a big problem.
So do we know that we are doing anything about it?
Well, there's this task force.
Created yesterday.
Yeah, there's the task force created yesterday. There's a classified meeting between the Department of Homeland Security Secretary and various election officials.
In other words, the answer is no.
Well, yeah, the answer is there's lots of public movements to suggest that we're doing things, really going back again to the Obama administration that first made the decision to classify voting machines and voting pieces of our voting world as infrastructure. And that designation has a big difference because that means you have to treat cybersecurity in that as seriously as you would cybersecurity in a power plant. And so that basically means that actually if there's a huge problem with voting infrastructure, even the National Guard can get involved, which they haven't yet, but is a big deal.
All right. So it seems to me there are kind of two things going on cyber in this whole cyber world. Right. That's one is the cybersecurity infiltrating the machines or the information network or whatever, right? Highway.
Right.
And then at the same time, you've got the Russians that we know of.
Yeah.
Using the internet to really mess things up or confuse things in the election with phony ads, phony organizations, phony protests.
Right. There's a ton of these. And importantly, it affected both sides of the political spectrum. So this is part of modern day, what the Mueller indictment on Friday identifies as information warfare. I mean, that's kind of what a lot of us, when we saw that, when we read that indictment, against 13 individuals associated with the St. Petersburg troll factory. We're like, wow, information warfare made it into this indictment. So this is, a big aspect of the way the Kremlin is basically trying to change people's opinions and very perceptions of reality in order to affect political outcomes and influence the election.
So let's say some specific examples. There were rallies, right? That were the pro-Trump rallies and anti-Trump rallies.
Right. All organized from afar by members of this, basically employees of this St. Petersburg troll factory, the IRA, which is run by this guy that actually, he runs a series of restaurants in Moscow, and he's very close associates with Putin. He's even called Putin's chef. And so these rallies orchestrated from afar by St. Petersburg, if you were participating in them, you had no clue of that, because what's sort of amazing about this indictment
So you would learn about this, but you went on Facebook and find out that there's a...
Right, if you went on Facebook...
Anti-Trump rally in front of the White House today.
Right.
Sponsored by some phony group, right?
Right. Well, so one of the best ones was Muslims for Hillary, which is, of course, like... right, I mean, and I'm sure that there were lots of Muslims that voted for Hillary, but the creation of that group was a deliberate piece of information warfare, because, the hope was that it would be so controversial and antagonistic to the opposing side that then you would create like a kind of false panic. And that's what they did. They actually tricked people into... and also paid people into showing up, organizing rallies on both sides of an issue, and made brought into existence discord and antagonism that might not exist otherwise, all over. Sort of like basically by creating a perception that wasn't exactly true. But they also capitalize on schisms within society that already exist, that we already talk about on social media.
Well, I read somewhere yesterday that immediately after the Parkland, Florida shooting, that these guys were up to it on both sides of the gun control debate.
Yeah.
So what is their purpose? Just to further divide Americans?
This is, and this has become a really interesting sort of like point of debate since the indictments on Friday. So if you went back to the summer of 2016 and you talked to members of the intelligence community, they would say Russia is trying to interfere in our election, and it seems like their intention is to create disruption and to antagonize people and sow discord. And Hillary Clinton would say they're also looking to undermine my campaign, and Donald Trump would say that's all nonsense. By the way, Russia, if you're listening, can you please find Hillary Clinton's missing emails? An actual direct quote.
Right.
Skip ahead to right before the election, and the intelligence community changes their story a little bit, and this is a huge part of the problem is how slow they were to begin to talk about these efforts. They change their story a little bit, and they say, actually, we've decided that one of the intentions of the Kremlin in this regard was to influence the election in favor of Donald Trump, which was pretty conspicuous if you were actually watching the fake content that they were creating, actually watching the influence campaign pan out. Hillary Clinton says, well, I told you so, and I'm very angry. Donald Trump begins to call the entire thing a hoax. You enter into the investigation, which is trying to gauge the degree to which the Trump campaign actively participated in these matters or was an unwitting beneficiary. And that's really what the Mueller investigation is all about, figuring out the degree of active participation, knowing, and collusion on their side.
Right.
And now you get to the point where yesterday, in an indictment, the Mueller team has to say, no, the intent was very clearly to effect change for Donald Trump, but Donald Trump has to change his talking points, acknowledge the reality of the active measures campaign without acknowledging that it helped him or delegitimized his win. And so now their talking point is, well, they're just trying to sow discord and disharmony. And if everyone can go ahead and get behind me and stop with this investigation, which is hurting our harmony, then then we'll all be better off, and then we'll beat the Russians. So you watch this talking point evolve from not happening, never happening, to clearly it's happening, but it's not happening because I colluded. And if we just drop this whole thing, then they'll stop having an effect.
But Donald Trump hasn't even said that yet. He hasn't acknowledged that they interfered in or tried to interfere in our election yet.
Well, he's over.
Has he?
Well, it's so
I haven't heard it.
On Twitter,
he's denied it. He said I asked Vladimir Putin, and Putin told me he didn't do it, and so I believe Vladimir Putin.
That's true, and that is one of the many things that Donald Trump has said. Donald Trump is like the great thing. If I were to write a fun like sort of Black Mirror like version of the Donald Trump presidency, it would be funny because sort of like Scream, there would be like 5 of them, and you would have access to different ones at different points in the day.
Yeah.
So yes, he definitely has said that, and that is a talking point that he relies on every so often. Since Friday's indictment, he's also said tried to place blame for the Russian hacking on the Obama administration not doing enough.
Right.
Which is a new tack that he's taken, especially on Twitter.
Yeah, the last few days, this has been the new thing. And it's been
but I imagine
Donald
that he'll
Trump and everybody else. Sean Hannity, we played that Sean Hannity clip the other night.
Right.
When Obama in the Rose Garden, I was there when he said, you'd have to be crazy to think that Russia would be able to undermine our election. And basically, we're not going to do anything about it. And Donald Trump should stop whining about it.
Right. So we'll go
should
back
Obama
to,
have done more?
Yes, he should have. Yes, he should have. And the reason why they didn't do
like
more.
What?
So I don't know if you saw this, but Joe Biden at an event at the Council of Foreign Relations a little while ago said that in the summer of 2016, there was an effort to like make a bipartisan statement condemning Russian activity, and that was back when it was still pretty politically safe to do it. You could just say the Russians are here; they're trying to make discord.
Imagine it was politically safe to criticize the Russians.
I know.
Today it's not.
Mitch McConnell shot it down because it was going to make Mitch McConnell shot it down, is what Joe Biden has said, and I would love to see some more questions about that. Well, it's going to undermine potentially Donald Trump. And so it was a pure tactical strategic play that I find very cynical and not very patriotic. But that's at the same time, I remember covering this in July of 2016 and finding all sorts of intelligence sources that couldn't go on the record to say this is happening. So instead, you had to rely on the private cybersecurity community. You had to rely actually on CrowdStrike and their findings. And meanwhile, I could talk to people on background in the intelligence community that would say this is absolutely happening. But it took until October when James Clapper and the national security community put together a report saying this is happening. So from July to October, you basically have no opportunity to shoot down this idea that this is fake. And that gets into fake news and how to protect against it. And this is the thing that we've learned very recently. All right.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, first of all, you've got the social media companies themselves that were taken in.
Right.
Now, maybe they were just taken in because they were offered so much money, but it wasn't that much money, right?
No,
it wasn't billions and billions of dollars. So how can they filter out what comes to them, right? People are using them to spread this fake news, really, about these fake organizations, fake rallies and everything. And then you've got people like all of us on the receiving end who go on Facebook or Twitter and they see this stuff, and how do we know to believe it or not? So let's start with like Facebook, Google, and those companies. What can they do?
Yeah, it's a very tricky problem for them because this is
it was particularly Facebook, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was particularly Facebook, and a VP of advertising at Facebook kind of embarrassed himself over the weekend and has since apologized for suggesting that the intent of the Russians wasn't to sway the election for Donald Trump because he's looking specifically at ad buys, and in fact, the activity on Facebook by the Kremlin was extended far beyond ad buys. But they're kind of in a catch-22. They can't really do much, in part because the way these systems work is you've got a small handful of people. They're mostly hardcore programmers, and mostly what they do is just keep the services on and keep the new services available to as many users as possible. There's no money in stopping like users from accessing fake news. That's not something that has affected their bottom line. Facebook and some others have engaged with third parties like an organization called First Draft to try and vet news items that show up. But the thing that comes out in this Mueller indictment is that this troll factory was getting pretty resourceful in the way that they were creating content to slip through Facebook filters. They were using virtual private networks with servers located in the United States so that you couldn't trace the traffic back to St. Petersburg. So they're really they're kind of in a tricky position, actually trying to stop this stuff in the way that they exist right now until the arrival of a new social network that takes this sort of thing seriously. So really, the onus is very much on us. And the way that we can stop or better...
You mean individuals or the government?
Individual consumers of news.
All right.
And I think government, sure. But the way that we can better understand how this stuff happens, there's some new research to suggest that if you can reach people and tell them about fake news that is expected to be coming out, if a fake news campaign that's as specific as possible, but even very generally, then you can sort of inoculate them against the influences of propaganda, and that's the best way to do it. So it's something that you might want to take on by yourself. There's an article that I wrote recently. There's a couple of researchers from Cambridge that actually created like a video game where you play a fake news troll, and what they found through research is that if you are sort of forced to adopt that persona in a virtual setting and actually use many of the tactics and tricks that this troll factory used, then you become much more skeptical of fake news items that come in front of you. So you can actually learn to detect this stuff and understand it if you understand the tactics.
Yeah, but nobody's going to,
no one's going to play this game?
Nobody's going to play that video game, right? Every time, all right, I see something on Facebook, before I believe it, I'm going to go to this video game and play this video. No, that's never going to happen.
Right. Well, and here's where it comes down to like social...
People believe what they see on television. They believe what they read in the newspaper. They believe what they see online.
Yeah. Well, especially, especially when it comes from their peer and friend circle.
Yes.
So that's a huge part of it, too. This is what another aspect of what the current research has shown.
Sure. Certain people... I know one person in particular, anything that he sees on Fox and Friends, he believes.
Right.
Well, what influence does he have?
Yeah, that's right.
I wonder if he's watching us.
I wouldn't. Yeah, right. I wouldn't name any names.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah. So
you're doing a wonderful job, Steve Doocy. I love what you're doing here this morning. Wonderful report, Steve Doocy.
He would tweet that out.
Yeah, I know.
You think about that? Yeah.
I know. It's really
the idea that Steve Doocy would be the ultimate source of
information for
the nation. That is scary.
I tweeted something.
That's really scary.
Like 3 years ago, that said something like, "Can you imagine being the type of person that wakes up in the morning and gets all of their news from Steve Doocy?" And now we have that person as president.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, literally. That's kind of horrifying.
Doocyville.
Yeah.
This is sort of related, but you've written about it, and I wanted to ask you about it because I was intrigued by this. That I guess it relates to cybersecurity somehow. But the Pentagon is getting this money to shoot down drones?
Yes. Yeah, of course. You mean to counteract UAVs?
Yeah. I saw the headline here about. Anyhow, go ahead.
Yeah, this has been a huge problem for the Pentagon, highlighted by operations in Syria.
$66 million to shoot down. These North Korean missiles.
Oh, right. So the Pentagon, that's true. So the Missile Defense Agency in the last budget request gets $66 million for a program called the Low Power Laser Demonstrator Program. And the intent is to affix onto a UAV about the size of a General Atomics Avengers, like it's the size of a small Cessna. So it's a big drone, but a small plane, small enough to kind of slip under radar. They're going to try and stick a laser on it in the, I want to say 50 to 150 kilowatt range, but they still keep the wattage classified from me, which is ridiculous because I can just speculate. Sorry, guys. And the point is to destroy a North Korean missile during what's called the boost phase. This is when it's easiest to hit these things. It's right when it's taking off. It's created a big plume of fire that's detectable with a thermal satellite in space. And just because of physics and also geometry, that's when it's easiest to take these things out. So the point is to get the drone beneath North Korean air defenses, and because it's small enough, beneath their radar, have it near, like a bunch of these nearby, and when they start to launch one of these, probably with a mobile rocket launcher, with a mobile rocket launcher, the laser comes in, knocks that sucker out.
That's insane.
That is the kind of our
totally insane.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our only hope. Listen, this is the problem is that, and this is a thing that the Missile Defense Agency and the Pentagon haven't been like really super forthright about. We've given this agency and the Pentagon just gobs of money in the hundreds of billions hundreds of billions of dollars specifically to shoot down missiles and try to intercept them. It's real hard, and we're doing pretty mediocre just in terms of our own testing. Well, so when the show actually comes, we don't have a great idea of how well these will actually perform, but we do know that physics says if you can knock it out in the boost phase, that's your best shot, and so we're doing this. It's expected to be online in 2020.
This is the latest iteration of Star Wars, right? Which has been bogus from the beginning, as far as I'm concerned. At any rate, Patrick, we're out of time, but what great work, great stuff. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to find a bank with a purpose. I wanted to find a place that would take my money and not use it to cause the financial crisis, but to fix the financial crisis and to help end income inequality.
The people that we employ are usually clients right off the streets. They don't have an account, but Amalgamated is willing to get that started for them.
Their reputation of supporting the working man, I think, speaks for itself. This is a bank that cares for their customers, and I appreciate that.
We were able to access a construction loan through the bank's programs, and that loan has helped us house 28 families in the community.
Amalgamated is a bank that was started for and about working people.
Many of our customers have a deep commitment to advocating for social and economic justice. We share that commitment, and we're not afraid to stand up and say that we need to change some of the way that the country does business.
Giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show. Live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Big showdown in Florida yesterday at the state legislature in Tallahassee. And the NRA won. The students lost, but that's just round one. The students are not going to go away. They are determined, and in the end, they will prevail, I believe. Hello, everybody. What do you say on a Wednesday? Great to see you. Thanks for joining us. It is the Bill Press Show, and we are with you wherever you are in this great land of ours, on radio and television, online, coming to you from our studio on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., with all the news of the day, such as it is. We've got our eye on what's happening. Congress is out of town, but lots of shakeup at the White House. Jared Kushner apparently telling people that he doesn't care what John Kelly says. He only has an interim security clearance. For some strange reason, he cannot get a permanent security clearance. We wonder what that is. And he says he is still going to stay on the job and do everything he's doing. He doesn't care what John Kelly says. We'll see how that plays out. Meanwhile, the president holding a listening session today on ideas about gun safety, none of which he will pay any attention to, while his son is over in India making money for the entire family selling the Trump brand all over the world. And we'll find out about that with our guest, Adam Smith from Every Voice.
Hey, good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. Good to be back.
All right. I'm surprised you're not in India following Donnie around.
I wish.
So Adam's with us for the first half hour here, and so are you. Remember, send us your comments about everything going on Twitter at BP Show. But first,
this is the Full Court Press.
Just a couple of other stories making news. Sir. Bill, we're still on the Black Panther beat after it has made
How much money now?
They've made so much money. Well, here's the thing.
I still haven't seen it.
You got to go see it. You got to go see it. Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta tweeted out a photo yesterday showing that they are now offering direct flights to Wakanda, the fictional African nation featured in the movie. They just tweeted out a photo of the gate sign that said Wakanda, leaving at 7:30, flight number 1234, saying, quote, "The bags are packed, hashtag Wakanda forever." Now, you cannot actually buy a ticket to Wakanda since it is not a real place, but they thought they'd have a little fun with it, and good for them.
And you know what? There are probably suckers who showed up for the flight.
Probably.
We are talking Georgia.
Yeah, exactly. Good morning and congratulations to Linda Belcher. Linda Belcher is a Democrat, a former state legislator who lost her seat in the Trump landslide in Kentucky in 2016. Well, she came back and reclaimed her seat. It was a district that went for Donald Trump by 49%. 49% is what Donald Trump won the district by. How did Linda Belcher do? She won, defeating the GOP opponent, Rebecca Johnson, 68-32. It was not close. So
I think this is now 37 legislative seats. Is this a congressional or legislative?
It's a legislative seat.
I think it's 37. The Democrats have flipped.
I think you're right. Yes, I believe you're right.
But
Bill.
Kentucky, whoa.
In Kentucky, in bright red Kentucky. Yeah. By the way, a new study coming out of California says, University of California, you want to live a long life?
Smoke pot.
No. Eat right. Maybe you don't have to exercise as much as you thought that you did, because the thing that they say is have 1 glass of beer or wine per day.
Really?
I mean, we've seen studies like this before, and they say that this is the latest information. This is from the neurology department of the University of California. They said that modest drinking improves longevity. 2 glasses of beer or wine per day were nearly 20% less likely to experience a premature death, and 1 glass of wine or beer per day will help you live past 90 years old.
I guess I'm going to live a long time.
Yeah, right? It's never too early to crack that first beer, Bill.
We're all going to be centenarians.
Take The Bill Press Show anywhere you go. Download our free podcast, search for The Bill Press Show on iTunes, and catch the highlights from every show.
On this Wednesday, February 21, The Bill Press Show. Yes, indeed, students made their first stand yesterday from Florida, made their first stand at the state legislature in Tallahassee. State legislators were not happy to see them, and they basically rebuffed them by refusing to even consider, to even open debate on a measure to ban assault weapons in Florida, but the students are determined to keep up the fight. Good for them. They're on the right track. They're coming up to Washington for a big march on March 24 here in Washington, and you can bet they'll be seen in Tallahassee again before the end of the year. It is a great day here for all of us in the United States. Lots of news to talk about. That's our job. Here on The Bill Press Show, whether it's online on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show, on TV, on Free Speech TV, and on the radio out in the greater Chicago area, WCPT, the progressive voice of Chicago. We'll tell you what's going on. You tell us what it all means to you. Send us your comments on Twitter, @BP Show. Adam Smith joins us from the great organization Every Voice, which is particularly focused on money in politics and how to get the big money out of politics, and people who are maybe using the political system to enrich themselves. Oh, I wouldn't be talking about the Trump family. Adam, hello.
Hey, I'm doing well.
And so here we got Donnie Jr., who's, okay, he and Eric are head of the business,
That's right. That's right.
First of all, that their father has nothing to do with anymore because he has totally divorced himself from the Trump business.
Yes, Trump did not divest from the business, and his sons have both said that they provide Dad with regular updates. So I think that he is pretty well in tune with what's going on with his business.
Exactly. You know that he is.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So Donald Trump Jr. on the business side, so he's over in India.
Yeah.
They're opening a new condo over there.
Yeah.
Right. That has the golden letters Trump on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he has
What do
actually
those
four.
condos
He
go
actually has
for?
4 properties.
4 properties. Oh.
Four deals, properties happening. So this is one of those licensing deals where the other people build them, they put their names on it. But part of the deal
he does all over the world.
Yes, but part of the deal is he actually has to go there occasionally, Don Jr., to try to sell them. So they had newspaper advertisements that said Trump has arrived. Have you and like the run up to his arrival, and people who put down payments on the condos while he's there this week will actually get to have dinner with him. And then the wild thing is tomorrow he's giving a speech.
Well, I want to get to that.
Yeah,
but so how much are these condos going for?
I actually don't know the exact price, but they
how
are
many
probably
people in India can afford a condo in a Trump tower?
It's a good question, but I bet as the U.S. tries to work on trade agreements or other things with the Indian government, it would be a steal for a wealthy Indian businessman to buy one of these condos this week. Then he gets access to lobby the president's son. So
Right.
say Don Jr. hears from 5 businessmen about why a trade deal on or tariffs on this or that would be good. You think he's not going to go back to his dad and say, Dad, I heard these things from these meetings? I mean, that would go against everything we know about the Trump family.
This is all about buying access.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
all about selling the presidency, really.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And it raises these real conflict questions. One, on our side, is how do these sales, how does Trump business in India impact how American foreign policy is decided? And on the Indian side, you have to look at some of these business partners have ties to the national parties there. There's no way they don't have ties to the government. And will then government officials say, we need to do this or this to make sure we keep one of our business people happy and impress the president?
Now, you can see on their side, right? They may not think this is kosher, right?
Yeah.
But they don't dare not show up.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they don't show up, then they won't have any access, really. They're not going to be a player.
Yeah, and everything we've seen from the president is he's a kind of guy who holds grudges. He will react to people who he feels like do him wrong. And you could absolutely see his son going. His son was at Mar-a-Lago with him last weekend. He talks to Don Jr. all the time. There's no way he doesn't know what's going on. And there's no way Trump hasn't asked about. Trump has seen all the news this week. There's no way he's not going to say, hey, what happened?
Right.
And you actually had one of the business partners for him in India saying tell the Times that it's absolutely true that the name and the ties to the presidency are incentivizing people from buying this.
All right. So there you've got the business side of it.
Yeah.
That's already bad enough.
Yeah.
Now you start to get to this. On top of this, was it today or tomorrow? What?
Yeah.
He's giving a major, foreign policy speech?
Yeah.
He's talking about Indo-Pacific relations. What the hell? Who is he?
It is. I know. And there is this one quote where, the spokespeople said, other prominent business leaders, like the head of Netflix and Uber, will also be speaking. I was like, please don't compare yourself, Trump's large adult son, to people from Netflix and Uber. But it's a good question. Nobody seems to know what he's going to say. There's a story in the Huffington Post yesterday where you had a State Department spokesman say, I don't know what he's going to say.
I saw the State Department has nothing to do with this trip, right?
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
nothing
That's what
about
they're
it?
saying. Yeah.
They're not involved in it?
Yeah.
I believe that.
I do too. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders says, this is a private citizen. But the thing is, when you're the president's son, if you're speaking at a global business summit right before Prime Minister Modi speaks, how is it not going to influence American
policy? And your name is Donald Trump Jr.
Yeah. It's just either like naive of the Trump people or they just don't care.
He is speaking for the administration.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what does he know about Indo-Pacific relations?
He knows about his condo. That's about it. Yeah. No, exactly. It's outrageous. And so, again, that's such an important country and such a powerful and longtime ally of ours, right? But the idea that be taken over by Donnie Jr., right, who, as part of a huckster. I mean, he is a huckster, and he's over there, pumping or pimping these condos, and meanwhile being recognized as a spokesperson for the United States of America on Indo-Pacific relations.
Yeah, there's people won't. We might like the State Department might be able to say this has nothing to do with us. We don't see a difference. People don't see that broadly. People see Donald Trump Jr. as Donald Trump's son, and what he says is what is similar to what his dad thinks.
Okay, so obviously he's in this for the money. He's making, but he's not the only one. I mean, this money, part of this has gone right into his daddy's pocket, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Trump still owns the Trump organization. He is not divested from it. Just because he doesn't have day-to-day dealings mean he doesn't make money from it. And he didn't create a blind trust like he was supposed to. So he'll see these stories. He'll see condos being sold, know that it goes to him. Just like money spent at his hotel in D.C. or anywhere else. Or Mar-a-Lago. Everything goes to him.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned the Mar-a-Lago because I on the train the other day sat down alongside of some guy, recognized me right away, and all he wanted to talk about was Mar-a-Lago and about how often Trump goes there.
Yeah.
And who's paying for it. What is the story of Mar-a-Lago? First, well, we know one thing. Anytime he goes to one of his properties, it's a big sales job for his property, right?
Yes.
It's whether it's
Free
Sterling,
advertising.
Virginia, or Bedminster, New Jersey, or Mar-a-Lago. It's free advertising.
Yes, it's free advertising, and it is assigned to people that if they get a membership there, they may get access to the president. Over the weekend, there are two stories about how he was surveying guests at Mar-a-Lago, both about gun issues and gun safety issues, as well as whether he should fire John Kelly. So it's like, do you want to weigh in on White House staffing or policy? Buy a $200,000 membership to Mar-a-Lago.
If you want to influence Donald Trump and have his ear, rather than run for Congress or be a United States Senator or member of Congress, become a member of Mar-a-Lago.
Listen, everything we know about Donald Trump, right? Who do you think whose opinion he would take more seriously? A lifelong servant to the country who is there to serve the country and wants to give the president their best advice, or someone who lined Donald Trump's pocket?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And the thing is, all of this is happening. Like, he's profiting off the presidency.
Some drunk at the bar in Mar-a-Lago.
Right.
Yeah. You talking about Eric Jr. or Eric, right? Sorry, that was offensive. But he's doing this. The thing is that, like, stick with me, is he's doing this. He's profiting off the presidency. Taxpayers are covering it. All the while, everyone, they're trying to, require work payments for Medicare and trying to cut Social Security, all these austerity budget measures, while he's profiting off the presidency. And it really, sticks out to me that where his priorities are. His priorities are personally profiting while, hurting everyone else.
Okay. So but now back to this question of Mar-a-Lago. When he goes there, it costs taxpayers a pretty penny.
Yeah, it's unclear sort of how much money is being spent. We have some Secret Service stuff. I think the estimate's about $3 million a trip.
That's what I've heard.
Because it's the cost of the Air Force One.
Last weekend was pure pleasure, right? There was no business.
He did go to Parkland, but there's no way he would have gone to Parkland last weekend if he wasn't going to Mar-a-Lago.
No way. There's no way.
Right.
But yeah, some of that. So it's unclear.
Most weekends he goes down there is just to play golf.
Yes, that's absolutely right, and it's unclear how much rooms cost. Are they paying for X amount of rooms for the White House staff that's there? So it's unclear about that. So we don't have a true picture of how much money is actually being spent at Mar-a-Lago.
Well, yeah, because they'll never tell us that.
Yeah,
but the rooms are not free.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's right.
They're taking up rooms for the top staff. And for some Secret Service, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right. Look, the president has to be protected. So he's got to have Secret Service protection. But in terms of somebody's paying for all those rooms, and somebody's paying for the meals, and all that's going into the Mar-a-Lago budget, which is bottom line Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's the difference between when George Bush went to his ranch or when Obama went to Hawaii. That money wasn't going into their pockets, right? This money is absolutely going into Trump's pockets.
Mm-hmm. Right. And is that legal?
It's a good question. I think the question, yeah. Probably. the government paying, because the government can pay whoever they want for their stays and that sort of thing.
It stinks, but I think Donald Trump has found a way to A, run for president, and B, serve as president while making tons of money.
Yeah, absolutely right. And
he has turned the presidency into a big cash ring.
Yes, and when he goes to these places, he's going, like last weekend he went to some Studio 54 disco party that they had in Mar-a-Lago. Like the night before he ended up...
Donald Trump at a disco party?
Well, there's a picture of him. The thing about reporting in the Trump era is you always have to look at Instagram. And so there are all these Instagrams of him at these places. So there's he and Melania are just sitting on this couch at this disco party. It's like, and it's a really funny picture. But the thing is, people go and have these events.
Oh,
they book these events because they know Trump will show up and crash them.
Right. Oh, I see. At Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
It makes sense. You could plan your wedding at Mar-a-Lago, right? He might show up.
Absolutely.
Get a photo with the president of the United States.
Yeah. At one point at Bedminster.
Birthday party.
Yeah. At one point at Bedminster.
When's your kid's next birthday party, Peter?
Yeah, exactly. We just had one this past week.
It might be a little expensive, I will say.
Just missed it.
Last month, the RNC, they had that big fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago that Trump had to miss because of the government shutdown. The RNC paid Mar-a-Lago $62,000 last month. So I think events there are a little pricey. I don't know, Peter, I don't know your situation. Maybe you can't afford it, but I just want to throw that out there.
Well, we just had a party, or we would have. We totally would have. Gosh, darn.
And this kind of brings around to something you and I have talked about before, which is this little hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue, right down the street here.
Yeah.
A few blocks. How is that doing? And that, again, is one of Trump's moneymakers.
Yeah,
right?
they're making tons of money. Last month, I think in the period of a week, both the NRSC, the NRCC, the RNC, and Mike Pence all had events at that hotel. So he's making a ton of money off of it. But there is still that lawsuit from the D.C. and Maryland governments challenging whether he's violating the emoluments clause that way. And last month, a judge appeared more sympathetic to that case than a judge had previously in another lawsuit. So we still have are waiting for an update on how that's going to go forward.
And the General Services Administration with the lease has just basically looked the other way. I mean,
they have,
right?
yes. Yeah. They approved it and looked the other way.
So even though the language said if you're a federal government employee or work with, or you cannot have a lease with the federal government, here's the President of the United States violating clearly the terms of the lease, and the federal government does nothing.
There are definitely some criticisms of the way GSA handled that. The memo that they said that sort of approved all of this, and there are some real questions about that lease, but for now, it's everything they say is fine.
Yeah. I just want you mentioned Eric Trump. Donald Trump does seem to be the out front guy for the Trump business.
Yeah.
But, he's not alone, right? I mean, Ivanka still has her line of
So Ivanka did the
products,
same,
right?
allegedly did the same thing that Trump did, right? That
put somebody else in charge of the business, but she didn't divest.
That's absolutely right. So she still makes money from it. Those sweatshops in all those foreign countries, she's still making money off of them.
Right. I mean, I don't go online to the Ivanka to look at what I can buy from Ivanka Trump most days, but I mean, if I did, she's still got a line of clothing and accessories, correct?
She absolutely does, yeah.
Ivanka, which are being sold right now on new licenses, for example, for China and other. Okay, and how about Melania?
So Melania does not have any of her own. She doesn't have a line of clothing or any of her own sort of stuff.
She did, didn't she?
Well, there was this situation when she was first inaugurated where her lawyer tried to say that her lawyer said that the presidency would help boost her image, and everybody said, "Oh, I can't believe you're saying that." But then the lawyer sort of removed that from a lawsuit.
Yeah, right.
There was it was a defamation lawsuit. But no, she doesn't have any of her own company or have her own line of stuff. I wouldn't surprise if she did after she leaves, though, depending on what the brand looks like then.
And how about Eric?
Eric runs the company along with Don Jr.
But you don't see him out in front as much.
Yeah, he does some TV, but he's definitely not out. He does some trips and some TV, but I think he's not as forward-facing as Don Jr. I think Don Jr. just really likes the attention. You know, he goes to Republican Party fundraisers around the country, and he's the one I think people see as the politician in the family, other than the dad. But yeah.
I got to tell you, there may have been a George H.W. Bush and then a George W. Bush. There is no way that there's going to be a Donald Trump and then a Donald Trump Jr. in the White House.
No, I don't think so.
Of course, I didn't think there'd be the first Donald
That's
Trump.
right.
I was going to say, right?
Yeah, right. But this whole question then of money in politics has come up. Adam Smith is with us from Every Voice. It's everyvoice.org, right?
Yep.
The question of money in politics has come up again in a big way in the last week since Parkland, Florida, and particularly yesterday with the state legislature in Florida voting down even a measure to allow debate on a ban on assault weapons. And you get right back to how much money the NRA was throwing around this Congress and throws around in state legislatures.
Yeah. And I think they might even have more power in state legislatures just because they're smaller, they're less expensive races.
Get more for your buck.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost you as much to buy a senator.
That's right. And I've been really struck by, I've been really inspired by these students over the past week. I'm sure you've talked about this on the show, and how they're, it's almost, they don't know that they're supposed to like be pessimistic, right? They're supposed to think that stuff can't pass.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't know that. And what's also interesting to me is how much they tie money and politics issues to this fight.
They see it, man. They see the connection.
Yes, and it's like even like Emma Gonzalez in her speech said, if you're going to tell me you have thoughts and prayers, I'm going to ask you how much money you got from the NRA. And that's been really interesting to me. There's an ad in the Times today, right?
Stop. You mentioned Emma Gonzalez, right? Well, no, she's a paid actor from Hollywood.
Oh, man.
Didn't you know that? Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
It's so gross that these people are trying to dismiss these students as paid actors.
Right.
You know, I think it says more about them than it says about the students.
The guy who did that, a state aide to one of the representatives in Florida who put out that email accusing two of these seniors of being paid actors from Hollywood, was fired yesterday, fortunately. But you know what? That gets picked up. Yeah, oh my God, Billy Graham died this morning.
Oh, wow. I was just getting that ready to.
This is a Bill Press Show breaking news update.
What can you tell us, Peter?
Yeah, all I can tell you is that Billy Graham has passed away. He was 99 years old. Billy Graham Evangelistic Association told NBC News first. CBS News also reporting it. That's all we have as of now, just that he's passed away, 99 years old.
Yeah, certainly powerful leader of the evangelical movement for years and years, and now his son Franklin
Talking
Graham.
about guys who have passed it on to their sons, right? Franklin Graham will carry that.
Right. So back to this. So this guy was fired for saying this, but it's a typical attack, right? Is to try to undermine the leaders of any new program or movement. Or
That's right.
They did it with the Me Too movement.
Mm-hmm.
All these women are liars. They're just liars. They also said they were being paid by Democrats. Nancy Pelosi or whatever was raised to pay these women to lie about Republican politicians. Yeah. Tell Al Franken that. Right. And then the same thing with the Black Lives Matter movement with Khizr Khan. They said he was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. He was a terrorist from Egypt, the whole thing. Now they're saying these kids are either paid actors or dupes of George Soros.
I think it shows they know how weak their arguments are. The people, on the other side, that they know that they can't stand up and say we can't have background checks, we can't get rid of the AR-15. They know how weak that is in this day and age, and so they just have to attack the messengers instead.
Yeah, but the money does make. Sadly, for some politicians, the money does make a difference. I mean, several people pointed out Donald Trump himself in 2010, in a book that he wrote, not Art of the Deal, one other phony book, somebody else wrote for him.
Yeah, I'm going to say air quotes. Yeah. He wrote.
Right, yeah. That he supported a ban on assault weapons and extensive background checks. Yeah. The NRA spent $30 million, I believe.
Something like that. The most they've ever spent on a presidential race.
In 2016.
Yeah.
And then he went to their convention and said, you really came through for me, and I'll be there for you, right? 100% or something.
Yeah, no, and the NRA spends a lot of money, and they also are able to turn out a lot of voters. So they have, and I think that some of that control they have over lawmakers is they've scared a lot of lawmakers more than they need to be scared. I think people support these gun safety measures more than they want to believe. But it will take the high schoolers, it will take a real uprising of people to push back against the NRA to make this stuff happen. I think it's a political problem. It's not necessarily a policy problem.
Right. But it comes down to, interesting, last week I went up to my high school in Wilmington, Delaware, where I graduated a couple of years ago, and talking to some 4 junior and senior government classes. And we talked a lot about money in politics, and they get it. Yeah. They get it, right? That it's almost like any issue you care about.
Yeah.
If it's environment, or if it's education, or if it's transportation, or climate change, or whatever, nuclear power, the money in politics is the sort of underlying, I believe, impediment to getting anything done.
Yeah. Were they cynical about it though? Were they thinking this means we can't?
No.
They were just like they were forward-looking and positive about it.
They were determined, like these students are in Parkland, Florida.
Oh, good. Okay.
Put it this way: they weren't ready to start a national movement. Like the students there, but they certainly recognize that this is a reality that kind of poisons politics.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to miss. You see it all the time, and I think that's what's so exciting about this younger generation is they.
So
they
what's
know,
the answer?
Well, what the answer? I mean. I believe that we need to figure out how do we not just reduce the power of big money, but how do we get more people in? How do we increase participation in politics? And one way we think to do that is through public financing programs, these small donor programs that allow candidates to run for office on the strength of the grassroots support. Washington, D.C. Council just a couple weeks ago unanimously passed a matching fund program so that candidates who run for the city council will receive a grant and have their small donations matched on a 6-to-1 basis.
And Mayor Muriel Bowser's against it.
Yeah. Yes, she allegedly is. She said she is.
I interviewed her a couple of weeks ago on that point. That was one of the things we talked about.
Yeah, but she, I think, is going to let it go into. We think she won't sign the veto and it'll go into law without her veto.
Yeah.
Then the fight becomes in the budget. But
didn't Bernie Sanders prove that you can do it without big money?
I think so. I mean, a national race is different than a local race.
True.
So while I think you can raise small donations at the local level, you won't be able to raise them not everybody will be able to raise them the amount that Bernie Sanders did. So you need a little help, right? So you need that 6-to-1 match or that 5-to-1 match on those small donations to make sure you have enough to be competitive either against a privately financed opponent or outside money.
Right. Yeah. But it's so important, and I see more and more people talking about it and trying different things. We've talked about what they're doing in Seattle.
Yeah, the vouchers program. Yeah, which sends voters. People get 4 $25 vouchers that they can give to the participating candidates of their choice, and that really democratizes elections because not everybody even has $10 or $15 to give. And yeah, you're seeing a lot of experiments at the local and state level on this, on how do we do this in a way that is specific to our community, but also achieves these goals of participation and reducing the power of big money.
Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, for those of you interested, we have heard that there are still some vacancies in the Trump Tower in New Delhi.
That's right.
So, right. You got about $3 million. Then you can have dinner with Donnie Jr.
You got to do it this week, though, if you want dinner with him. You got to do it this week.
What a prize.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Adam, great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for all the good work you're doing on a very important issue. Again, it's everyvoice.org. And we will be right back. Thank you, Adam. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation letter.
You're resigning.
Why? Because you're constantly ignoring me. You're half as active as you used to be, and you eat stuff like this. You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
I forgot. I'll do better. Please, don't quit on me.
Okay. But remember, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Adventure can be found anywhere, but the best place to start is in the forest.
I spy something beginning with S.
Snow?
No.
Snow-covered trees.
Nothing to do with snow.
Head outside to discover incredible animals and beautiful plants that come together to create an unforgettable adventure.
Wow.
So grab your loved ones.
Don't even.
And explore a world of possibilities.
Come on, this way.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find the closest forest or park to you.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the agony of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Download our podcast, search for The Bill Press Show on iTunes, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Bill Press Show.
And here we go now with the Bill Press Show on a Wednesday, February 21. Thanks for joining us, friends, online on YouTube at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. Thanks for joining us on Free Speech TV and on WCPT out in Chicago. By the way, going to be heading out to Chicago soon, next month, for a big rally about my new book, From the Left. I'll tell you more about it later, and we'll tell you once we get a date and a place for that big Chicago event, and want to see as many of you there as possible. The breaking news as we head into our last little time together here, just before the break, we learned that the Reverend Billy Graham, dead this morning at the age of 99, born in 1918. Certainly a very powerful figure in the United States. And, you know, I have a mixed, I never met him, but I have a mixed reaction to Billy Graham. I mean, on the positive side, he was one of the great faith leaders of this country that we've ever had, a very charismatic figure. Who did so much to inspire millions and millions of Americans. I mean, at his peak, you know, Billy Graham would hold rallies, and he would fill Yankee Stadium.
The Billy Graham Crusades.
Billy Graham Crusades.
I've been to a couple of those.
Is that right?
Yeah, when I was a kid, my parents used to take me to see the Billy Graham Crusades.
Yeah, I mean, tens of thousands of people turn out for those. And
by the way, it was the football stadium in Columbia, South Carolina.
Is that right? Yeah.
Where the Gamecocks play. Filled with people, tens of thousands of people.
Right. And it was real, you know, and he was real, and he really did with a very powerful, upbeat message, and took those rallies and that crusade all across the country. I'm not sure I don't think there's anybody today who could do what Billy Graham did then, who has that kind of appeal, that kind of presence, that kind of a powerful message. And so he'll certainly be remembered for that. I think the negative is that he'll also be remembered for the person who really started us down this path of, mixing religion and politics, and sort of tearing down the wall of separation between church and state. Because Billy Graham, maybe, again, it's this magic of that access to the powerful politicians, but he really became best buddy with a total skunk, a total non-religious person by the name of Richard Nixon, a horrible president. And Billy Graham became one of his best friends and loved hanging out with him at the White House and defended him till the end. Watergate, all of that stuff, Billy Graham was still right there alongside of Richard Nixon, publicly defending him. So, and I think he did the faith movement a lot of harm and a lot of disservice, by the way, which continues to today, that the evangelical community today, starting, again, I think it started right there with Billy Graham. You cannot convince me otherwise, that it started the evangelical movement being a puppet of the Republican Party, and in effect today is nothing more, I believe, than an extension of the Republican National Committee. That's what the evangelical movement is today, led by, guess whom? Franklin Graham, Billy Graham's son, who has gone right down the path and who now defends Donald Trump, by the way, for things that were worse than what Richard Nixon did. Certainly when it comes to personal ethics, when it comes to Christian values, I have to say Donald Trump a lot worse than Richard Nixon. And Franklin Graham, all the stuff, the sexual assault, Franklin Graham is, well, Donald Trump said he didn't do it, and I believe Donald Trump. Same thing with Roy Moore. Roy Moore said he didn't do it, and I believe Roy Moore. So
I think the fact
it's just there's no daylight today between the evangelical movement and anything that any Republican says or does.
That's 100% true.
Yeah.
I mean, look at where we are. Look at what we have now, right? I have this conversation with my religious parents all the time. We have the most hedonistic, morally bankrupt human that we've ever had as president. And you know what? He's got the head evangelical in the country as his vice president, Mike Pence. He's got all these evangelicals that are lining up to support him, and he hides behind them. And that's now the blueprint, right? Like,
totally.
Nixon did it with Billy Graham.
Yep. And it started with Billy Graham.
Yeah.
So with all the good things that are going to be said about him today, rightfully so, and all the people that he did inspire and move as a Christian leader, you've got to say he also started us down the wrong path when it comes to identification of religion and politics. Meanwhile, back to the news of the day. Yes, indeed, the motif, of course, now, the big twist, if you will, for the White House on the Robert Mueller investigation, or I'm sorry, on the Russian involvement in the election, yes, and the Mueller investigation, which is looking into that, is that, hey, Donald Trump saying, don't blame me. Remember, we started with Donald Trump first with a tweet, and then Sean Hannity with a show last night. Don't blame me. Blame Barack Obama. I mean, it started under him, didn't it? Sarah Huckabee Sanders picking this theme up again at the briefing yesterday.
They're discussing this process and going through and looking every single day at the best ways forward. Everybody wants to blame this on the Trump administration. Let's not forget that this happened under the Obama administration.
Yeah. Blame Barack Obama. And while you're at it, blame the FBI. Because, they would have picked up, right, about this school shooting in Parkland, Florida, and something might happen down there. But the reason they didn't is because they were too busy trying to nail Donald Trump for cooperating with the Russians. Yeah, Sarah Huckabee Sanders actually doesn't back down, repeats that yesterday.
We would like our FBI agencies to not be focused on something that is clearly a hoax in terms of investigating the Trump campaign.
It's just pathetic.
Clearly a hoax.
Clearly a hoax. After last Friday's indictment of 13 Russians, where with excruciating detail, Robert Mueller and Rod Rosenstein, Deputy Attorney General, laid out exactly what the Russians were doing, when they started, where they went, how much money they spent, what they did, all in terms of undermining the and influencing and, if you will, tilting the 2016 election to Donald Trump. After all of that detail, Donald Trump and Sarah Huckabee Sanders both say, no, it was still a hoax. And back to whether or not Barack Obama should have done more. Damn right he should have. Yes. And we know why he didn't. He didn't because everybody thought Hillary was going to win. That if publicly they criticized, privately he did tell Putin, we were told at the White House at the time, I was there, that he had told Putin this is unacceptable, pull your people off, and Putin just said, we're not doing anything. But publicly the president didn't condemn Russia at the time or didn't do anything against Russia at the time, again, because he thought by doing so that he would have been interfering in the election and given Donald Trump even more reason to whine, remember, as he was doing every day about this election is already rigged because he knew he was going to lose. At least he believed he was going to lose. So, sure, President Clinton should have done more then, but Donald Trump's been president now for a year and a half, and it was under Donald Trump's presidency that it all came out exactly what the Russians had done. And the I told you this yesterday, reminded you of this yesterday, but it's worth repeating. And under Donald Trump, 17 intelligence agencies came out and said Russia interfering in the election to try to help throw it to Donald Trump. The entire United States Congress has voted for more sanctions on Russia because they said Russia interfered in the election and tried to throw it to Donald Trump. And now the Department of Justice, Donald Trump's Department of Justice, and the FBI have all said the same thing, and yet Donald Trump has still not even acknowledged what Russia did, has not condemned what Russia did, hasn't taken any actions to punish Russia for what they did, nor is Donald Trump doing anything to prevent Russia from doing the very same thing in the midterm elections. So, yeah, don't think you're going to get away with blaming it on Barack Obama. What are you doing, Mr. President? What are you doing now to protect not just your presidency, to protect American democracy, to protect our fundamental democratic system, which is the very heart of who we are?
That's
and the fact is, he won't do anything.
It's a good question. Why won't he do anything? Because he wouldn't be here if it weren't for that.
Right. He wouldn't be here, and he believes that any acknowledgement that Russia did anything takes away the legitimacy of his presidency and means that he didn't win it on his own. It's all about him again. It's all about that ego, right? And that's what's driving everything. So, meanwhile, the Russian, as we said before, the Mueller investigation just keeps charging on. And it's worth noting there is yet another person. Boy, other shoes are starting to drop. Yet another person. This was a Dutch diplomat who has pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. And he was a guy, sort of a minor player, but he was involved with Rick Gates and Paul Manafort. And so he now has, like George Papadopoulos, has admitted, this just happened, has admitted to lying to the FBI when they question him about his relationship with Rick Gates and Paul Manafort. He is now cooperating with Mueller. As we mentioned and was reported yesterday, according to the LA Times, Rick Gates himself has now said he will cooperate with Mueller against Paul Manafort. So those two are talking. George Papadopoulos is talking. Robert Mueller is flipping one after another, which again shows how serious they are, how serious this is for the Trump White House. On another topic, wanted to mention last night the White House Correspondents Association. We had a special meeting down at the Decatur House on Lafayette Park, right across the street from the White House. A very interesting panel with two press secretaries. One, the current press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and with her, the former press secretary for former governor, former President Bill Clinton, Mike McCurry. 2 points that I wanted to mention to you. One is Mike McCurry, who, when he came to the White House under Bill Clinton, the first thing he said was, you know what, we should do what we did at the State Department. We should allow cameras in the briefing room. They weren't there before then. But the difference was that at the State Department, you could have cameras filming the briefing, but you couldn't do it live. Cable companies, networks could not go live. They could only use little snippets from the briefing video in the news when they reported on the briefing later in the day. At the White House, Mike McCurry said, no, cameras are in, and yeah, you want to take it live, you can take it live. He said last night he thinks that's the biggest mistake he made, that he should never have done it. He wishes he had not allowed, cameras, yes, but no live coverage of the briefings, because he pointed out that they have become nothing but a clown show, nothing but entertainment. He said there's too much theater and not enough substance. Well, and so therefore we should take the cameras out. You know what? I totally disagree with him. He is right. The briefings have become a circus. But when did they become a circus? With Sean Spicer and Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Because they throw out so much crap. And the reporters respond, and that has made the briefings really much more antagonistic and hostile and sometimes just out of control than they ever were. I mean, yeah, we got a lot of BS, and I told you about that at the time, from Robert Gibbs or from Josh Earnest and Jay Carney. But it was civil, and there was a good exchange back and forth, and we would push back, and they would push back. But it was all sort of at an intelligent, substantive level. I mean, today it's just they throw insults, they lie. The briefings get later and later every day. They're shorter and shorter, and there is a real hostility. It's almost like open warfare in there.
I know we've moved very, very quickly in this last year or so since Donald Trump became president, but let's not forget, Saturday Night Live got one of their best skits in a long time out of Melissa McCarthy playing Sean Spicer.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And literally, like, the skit essentially was her showing up. At one point, she had a water gun she was shooting the press with. She had a motorized podium that she was mowing down members of the press with.
Popping pills.
But yeah, exactly. And so, like...
Yeah. Sean Spicer.
That was Spicer.
Right.
That was Spicer, and it's only continued with Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Absolutely. So disagree with Mike McCurry on that, but Mike McCurry on that, where I had to really totally agree with him is where he turned to Sarah Huckabee Sanders and he said, look, and talk about relations between, that's what the panel was about, between the press corps and the White House. He said, it's impossible. It's never going to get any better as long as your guy keeps talking about fake news, as long as he calls us the enemy of the American people. And then he turned to her and he said, you have to tell your president that he has to change the way he speaks about the media. Very powerful, right to her face. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders really had nothing to offer for that, because Donald Trump does hate the media. He's made it very, very clear, other than Fox News, particularly Fox and Friends. So it was a very interesting panel last night. But we come back to the big story of the day, which is what's happening on the gun safety front. Yesterday, a disappointing day for the students from Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. They piled into buses, 3 busloads of students down to the up to the state capitol in Tallahassee, and it turned out to be a very important day because one of the Democratic representatives, by far in the minority in the state legislature, had introduced a bill last October to ban assault weapons in California. In Florida, and decided this would be a good day to see if we can get a vote on it. So he introduced a motion to allow debate on a ban for an assault weapons ban. So first, like in the Congress, with a filibuster, they have to vote to vote. They vote to consider this. Yes, we will take this up, or no, we will not take this up. And with the students there in the balcony, some of them in tears when they saw what happened. The state legislature, what do they care about the students in Parkland, Florida? They showed it yesterday. Republican legislature voted 71 to 36, not even to allow a debate, not to allow a vote, not to take up the measure to ban assault weapons. Now, they might have taken it up and voted it down. They probably would have. But they wouldn't even, they didn't even have the backbone to allow a vote. You know why? Because they can't defend it. They can't defend their position. They cannot make a case why anybody needs an AR-15. And so they just duck it. A disappointing round one for these students. But let me tell you, that's just round one. These students, I made this point yesterday also on CNN, they're not going away. Stephen Colbert last night said the country belongs to these kids. They are not going away. They are determined, number one. First of all, they've had an experience none of us have had. They looked right down the barrel of an AR-15. You know, they looked around. They saw their friends shot and killed and mowed down by that AR-15 and 3 of their teachers. They're never going to forget that. And they're never going to just accept the fact that we can't do anything about it and that they can't do something to make other kids and themselves safer in the future. So this is a movement I think that's really going to is already starting to take fire in this country. And shame on the people who are trying to oppose them by attacking them and by slurring them and by slandering them. One state legislative aide who was fired yesterday in Florida who put out an email saying, "Oh, I saw 2 of those students, 2 of those seniors. Yeah, they're just paid Hollywood actors." No evidence. Not true. Not true. Put it out there. Got fired for it. Somebody who didn't get fired for it, for saying basically the same thing, former Republican Congressman Jack Kingston, who is a paid CNN contributor, who is paid by CNN to say crap like this, which he did yesterday morning on CNN on New Day, talking to Allison Camerata. By the way, she didn't take this crap from him without firing back. So this guy, Jack Kingston, saying, these students, they're all just pawns of left-wingers like George Soros.
Do we really think that, and I say this sincerely, do we really think 17-year-olds on their own are going to plan a nationwide rally? I would say to you very plainly that organized groups that are out there like George Soros are always ready to take the charge, and it's kind of like instant rally, instant protest.
You can hear Allison. She's just waiting.
She was ramping up, man.
She was ramping up. She was just waiting. And she did. She jumped in and she said, "Look, Jack," I'm paraphrasing, but she said, "I was down there. You weren't. I was in that school." She was talking to these kids before they even knew how many of their fellow students had been killed. She said, "They're for real. They're not being paid by anybody." You know, what the hell? They don't even know who George Soros is. But this idea that you personally attack these kids after what they've been through is just despicable. And I repeat the fact it's also despicable that this guy was paid by CNN to say that on national television. But you know what? I made this point earlier. I just want to repeat it. Jack Kingston is showing his ignorance, and he's also showing his age. He doesn't understand. Times have changed, man. He doesn't know anything about the social media. I mean, look at the Women's March on Washington, which started with just somebody putting out a tweet, and a woman in Hawaii saying to a couple of friends, "We ought to have a march in Washington." 1 million people showed up. There are different ways of building a movement today. We saw it with the Black Lives Matter movement. And we've seen it with the Me Too movement. And this is the latest, which is why I'm so hopeful about it. And through the social media, you're damn right. I mean, there's a protest 2 days ago in front of the White House. Kids lying down Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the White House. This movement in Tallahassee. There are branches, if you will, of the Parkland student movement popping up all over the country. They've not only planned this massive march in Washington. We're already getting calls from friends about who want to come to Washington for this march, just like the Women's March on March 24. There's not only there's going to be this big march in Washington, there's going to be marches all around the country at the same time. I really do believe that this student movement is getting traction, is going to continue to grow, and is going to make a difference when it comes to sensible gun safety. Not yet. Not yet. Didn't happen yesterday, but that is just the beginning. So good for them, and hopefully we'll never hear from people like Jack Kingston again. Hey, that about does it for today, folks. I want to leave you alone for the rest of the day, and hope you have a great day. But reminding you one more time of an opportunity here. I hope you'll take advantage of an opportunity to get a copy of my new book coming out just about a month from now, called From the Left: Life in the Crossfire. Lots of good stories about all the some of the great times and interesting experiences that I've had, both working for Jerry Brown, working in the media down in Los Angeles, covering the war in Croatia and the war in Nicaragua, coming back here, hanging out with Barack Obama at the White House and Bill Clinton at the White House. And then on to the Bernie Sanders campaign. It's all here and From the Left. Go to BillPressShow.com and get your copy. Have a great day. Come back and see us again tomorrow.
Bill Press Show.
9. There he is. Billy Graham, dead at 99.